Hello everyone, do not adjust your TV, your tablet, or your phone because you are seeing double. That's my main man Cam right there, co-host. Cam, say
What's
hi.
going on? How's it going, guys?
That's short for Camronius Maximus, in case you guys were wondering.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, that's my
short.
Christian name.
Yes. His parents named him that for whatever reason. I'm your other co-host. That's Kirk. That's short for Kirkus McGurkus. I loathe my parents. What a terrible life to live.
That's tough. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like yours is like exciting. You know, it brings back like a gladiator vibe. You know, from Russell Crowe thing.
Yes,
you know. But whatever.
like
This
Maximus.
is spilled popcorn for you guys. It's spilled popcorn. It's our brand new web series where we dive deep into TV and movie content and we speculate on what it all means at an alarmingly unhealthy rate.
It's true. What does it mean? What does it mean, Kirk? All I know for sure today is that today is shawarma time. You know, shawarma time.
Oh,
So
it's so fitting because, of course, right now our focus is WandaVision. You guys
Yes.
can check out our first video on episode 1 and 2 in the comments, in the link, in our channel, Popcorn for Breakfast. That's our, what would you call it, our parent company podcast. We started out as a podcast about a year and a half ago, and now we're moving full video as well in tandem.
yeah, and I'll put the video link right up here, guys, where my fingers
Right
are
there.
pointing. Yep.
It's like way up there. Like, I think I'm below you, right? Like, my image is below yours.
You are
in the
below me, and you were pointing in the opposite direction of me because I think
Okay.
I'm like flipped.
Okay, cool. I'm going to point this way now. Don't
But
be
that's where it will
confused,
be,
everybody.
somewhere in this vicinity. I'm like
I'm
backwards.
just going to cover all my, and you know, in case something happens with the graphic,
somewhere
it's
in this region here.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to be spoiling episodes, unlike our podcast where we typically don't spoil movies and TV. This one, we're going hard. We're trying to digest WandaVision, give you all the details. There's so much going on in every episode. It's kind of impossible to really grasp all the details because you probably have to watch it 13 times before you get it. So, Cam, are you all caught up on the show?
Of course. Yeah, I've watched each episode two times. So I'm dialed in.
Very nice. I think I need to start doing that. I'm only down for one watching per episode. I feel like I need to get up to 5 before we start doing these.
Yeah, you gotta start pumping up those reps. Those are rookie numbers, Kirk. We gotta get you moving up the line here.
Okay, that's my game plan. So you want to start us off with the unwrapping since you've clearly know this episode better than I do. Can you go ahead?
No
And
pressure.
give us what's going on. This episode gives us a Brady Bunch vibe for sure. But what else happens? Start this at the top.
Yeah, sure. So we open right up so we ended the last episode just to set the table with Wanda being pregnant, like visibly pregnant, despite us having no knowledge that was going on. And so this episode starts off with Dr. Nielsen in the Vision residence, using his stethoscope on Wanda's tummy, and he's like, yep, definitely pregnant, about 4 months. And so we know that Wanda's pregnancy is accelerating quite rapidly. The fact that, you know, we just saw her and Vision says something like 12 hours has passed since they became aware of it, and she's already 4 months pregnant. So things move along rather quickly. As Kirk mentioned, we're in a Brady Bunch 1970s all color environment this time. We still got our square aspect ratio, but we're all in color. And so, you know, I mean, the whole episode focuses around Wanda's pregnancy, her getting the nursery ready, Vision like playing that stereotypical like 70s dad, like reading the pregnancy books, and antics ensue around the pregnancy until ultimately, because she's accelerating through her gestation period so quickly, it's time for the babies to come. And that's sort of, you know, where things get crazy.
Yes. I love that the themes. I don't know how they nail it so perfectly. Obviously, they have all these blueprints from all these old shows that perfectly capture that time period of what it was, what stories were told and how they were being told in those eras. It makes me wonder, obviously we didn't grow up in the 50s, 60s, or 70s or 80s. That makes me wonder, like, were people like even akin to those real kind of cultural quips. I mean, I can watch those shows and love them. I watched them as a kid, from those time periods. But the way they nail it down, even down to the blueprint of the Brady Bunch stairway to the backyard. Like the
Yeah.
fake looking turf, like even though people
Yeah.
had real grass, like the turf because it was a studio. I love the fine touches on it. So kudos to the production team. They're just blowing it out of the water here.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, you mentioned like were people aware of it? I think it's just different. Like nowadays we expect television to be close to reality. That's what we want. Back then and like even before that, like how people talked in like 1940s and 50s movies, it's like
Man.
how Jimmy Stewart talks, like that is not how people talked back then, like it's not. So there was a separation between reality and what was going on television that everybody just sort of accepted.
Yeah, yeah. I wish we could talk like the people from the 1940s,
It's
with big
nice.
old glasses and suits and big dresses. I think let's just try it with sometime. Let's like have a
Yeah, we
have a
should. We should.
national mandate where for like a week everyone has to adjust to that just for fun. Just why not?
It would be a great time.
Some other crazy things that happen in this episode is that we get a new character introduction. It's the neighbor. His name is Herb. He's like my favorite person. He's got the biggest smile on his face. There's a lot going on, a lot more going on with that neighbor than we see. You can tell this actor has all the backstory in his head from the moment you see him. He's
Yeah.
across the half wall. He's trimming some bushes, and there is a noticeably and on purpose horribly green screen behind him that looks like sky goes on forever.
Yeah. Yeah, so Herb, he actually did make an appearance in episode 2 as well. He was in the neighborhood watch meeting.
Oh, that's right.
He was like the president of the neighborhood watch, but that was the only introduction we got to him. So they're kind of moving him closer to the Vision residents because he's now their next door neighbor, which is I think significant. Yeah, Herb has this. He has this scene where he's trimming the hedges and he's like, "How you doing, Vision?" And he like is trimming the hedges but goes into the wall, and Vision's like, "Hey, I think you took get more than the hedge there, Herb." And he's like, "Oh, so I have," but kind of keeps doing it. It's almost like and we'll get into it more, but like it's almost like a glitch in the Matrix type of feel to it, like he's aware of it, but he's also like not aware of it. He's like cutting into the wall, separating their properties. So that's an interesting moment with Herb, and he's one to watch for sure.
Yeah, they're just trying to. Everyone around is like just trying to keep it together, despite whatever kind of mishaps, mistakes come their way. And of course, all the while, Vision is like running outside for air, running outside to look for help. He literally runs and gets the doctor when Wanda goes into full-on labor within like 10 minutes of the episode, and he runs across town, gets him, runs back. And there's so many happenings that occur during this, and then it finally leads up to twins being born as a surprise to them. First Tommy and then Billy, in which they opposite named them, right? So Vision wanted Billy as the child's name, and Wanda wanted Tommy. They had a baby. He's like, it's got to be Tommy. And then baby number 2 comes out, and just perfect 70s quips. They say, and here comes Billy, and they have twins just like that.
Yeah.
I love it. I loved all of it. So I think we're pretty much to the full rundown of the episode before it gets real. So let's hop into the butter. I want to talk about some big details, big details. Cam, what stands out to you? One thing we didn't mention was that all the while during this is that Geraldine, a friend, comes in, who is, as we know, is Monica Rambeau. She comes in and she's talking about her walk through corporate life and how she's trying to climb the ladder, all the while Wanda's having these crazy not hallucinations. She actually there's a stork.
She conjures up a stork that's walking around her house.
And then she's like, get out of here. She's like, get out of here. She's like winking. She's like doing little hand gestures, and like her red magic is popping up. But that thing will not go away. And so finally it comes to terms that she is having the baby and Geraldine's helping her while Vision's getting the baby. But then there are some really crazy stuff that happens.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's dive into the butter. I mean, I think let's take it back real quick, kind of like try to dive into this in chronological order of where it happens. So we talked about Herb in his little scene that feels like a glitch in the Matrix. At least that's kind of how I'm describing it. Like the same cat walks by twice or something like that.
Yes.
It's like something that's happening that's just so bizarre that you're like, that doesn't seem right. But Herb seems like somewhat unaware of it. So that's interesting. After that scene, Vision goes inside the house, and Wanda's like, this is all happening so quickly, whatever. And Vision's like, yeah, you know what? Outside with Herb, I just had this weird conversation. And he sits down on the couch and kind of looks at Wanda, and he's like, I think there might be something wrong here, Wanda. And then Wanda, she looks at him, and then the scene resets. And he's like, yeah, but everything's going to be perfect. She retracts that statement in the same way that she retracted the beekeeper coming out of the sewer drain out of their life. So once again, we see that Wanda has some sort of control over this environment that presumably she has created.
Yes. That's a wonderful point. Funny?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What's funny about the beekeeper is that we only see him in the recap of this episode, and we don't see him again. Much like we hear about the radio call with Wanda, come in, Wanda. We hear about the recap, but we don't see it again. It's kind of like the showing of what they call Chekhov's gun. Here's something that happens, and then they just kind of let it lie, and it's in the back of your head. Obviously, Marvel is smart enough. It will come back, but no other mention of it in the episode, even though they brought it up in the recap. So I think we're going to get slammed hard with it in probably one of the next 2 episodes, if not one off and one off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, just in general, they're showing us things, and the deterioration of this mirage that Wanda has, in my opinion, created. She's created this alternate reality of some sort. It's starting to deteriorate more and more rapidly each episode, and I feel like they sort of exhibit that in different ways. But this episode was where you could really tell that something was going wrong, and we'll get into that more later. But I want to talk about the twins. Because we talked about it last episode on Spilled Popcorn, is that in the comics, Wanda has 2 boys that she makes herself pregnant because Vision is a synthezoid, and so that doesn't work, biologically or whatever. She uses her magic to conjure up 2 kids. And so I think one of my big questions going into this is kind of where do they go, and how close are they going to get to the comics? Because that's the thing that makes it really hard, to predict what's going to happen, is that the comics and the MCU are really close. They're not quite parallel, but they're not close enough to where you can just assume how things are going to happen or what's going to happen. So when they were having the Billy and Tommy conversation, in my head, I'm going, oh, that's just a nod to the comic book readers. They're like, here you go, guys, and they're actually going to have a girl or something,
Right.
And they even pull the bait and switch with the twins because they have Tommy, and then everything calms down. And you're like, oh, okay. It's done. And then she all of a sudden is like, I'm pushing again. And it's Billy. So I was like, oh, wow, we actually got the twins. So in the comics, Billy and Tommy end up becoming 2 superheroes named Wiccan and Speed, who are members of the Young Avengers. And if you go back and watch our last episode, I talked about how Marvel seems to be setting the stage for the Young Avengers. So we may have just gotten introduced to 2 new Young Avengers in baby form here.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the pregnancy could progress at such a rapid pace. We could see Young Avengers coming up pretty quickly. Maybe these kids age per episode,
I know,
2, 4, 6, 8 years, depending on how they want to space it. And then all of a sudden they'll be like, surprise, we also have Young Avengers. It's also already recorded, and here you go. It drops on April 15th. Whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, all bets are off with Marvel, right? I mean, we know that they're capable of incredible things. We know they haven't told us everything that's in the works. So it's going to be interesting to watch. But to your point, episode 1, 1950s, episode 2, 1960s, episode 3, 1970s, it seems like we're progressing 10 years every 24 hours. Yep. So these babies came out pretty big, which usually happens in TV shows because you can't get fresh newborns for television. No. But it might be another nod to hey, these guys are going to age pretty fast. We're going to move here.
I love how you called it a mirage, because it's so true, and it's kind of like, Wanda and Vision were in the dark, hence the black and white, and every step of the way they're getting more clues. Their eyes are opening. They're becoming aware of their full situation, even though us as the viewers, we're still not quite sure where we are, why we are, what we are, of what's going on, but we're following it with them as Wanda's figuring it out. Obviously, we know more than Wanda because we know that's not Wanda. This isn't Wanda. We know what kind of era she belongs in, right? And so the color just getting more and more, and the details getting more and more. And dude, there is a bomb dropped in this episode when Geraldine is standing over the it's not even it's a second crib. They built a crib during the episode.
Yeah.
They conjured up a second one out of nowhere. Maybe Geraldine ran to the store. I don't know. But they're sitting in the living room and standing in the living room, and Geraldine and Wanda are there, and she's like, "Wow, twins! Can you believe it?" And cutting close to Elizabeth Olsen, and she says, "I was a twin," and man, we haven't talked about her brother since the Avengers when he
Yeah.
died, when Pietro died, and what a bomb! What a bomb they dropped on us there.
Yeah, Age of Ultron, which is just a good reminder to go back and watch that film as you're kind of going through WandaVision, because that is as much screen time as we get from either twin, throughout the whole series, and it gives their origin story, the MCU origin story, I should say. So yeah, she mentions Pietro. She's singing what we can assume is some sort of Sokovian like lullaby to her baby.
Yes.
And then Geraldine goes, "He was killed by Ultron, right?" And while this is happening, Vision is outside, and he walked the doctor out, and he's having his own experience with Herb and Agnes that will sort of, these are happening side by side. We're like panning, we're cutting back and forth to them. So Geraldine says, he was killed by Ultron, right? And all of a sudden Elizabeth Olsen like snaps out of it, or Wanda snaps out of it, and she's like, "What did you just say?" And then we cut to Vision outside, and Agnes and Herb are like whispering while the doctor is leaving the house, and Vision's like, "What's going on there?" And they're like, "Oh, nothing, just shooting the breeze." And then Agnes goes, "Hey, Vision, is Geraldine in there with Wanda?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "There's something off about her. She has no husband." And Vision's like, "That's fine. Whatever." And she's like, "She has no home." And Herb goes, "Yeah, she's here because we're all," and he never finishes the sentence. And
Yes.
so that's where things really accelerate. So Vision's having this experience outside. Wanda's having this conversation with Ultron about Ultron, and Monica Rambeau / Geraldine tries to walk it back. She was like, "Oh, I said, you're such a strong woman. Do I need to repeat it for you?" And Wanda is getting hostile now. She's like, "What's going on?" She's got like the look of like it's on in her eyes.
Yes.
And she spots a sword necklace on Geraldine, and then all of a sudden Geraldine's gone. So
That's it. Dude, I just want to take this moment to be like, okay, so Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Wanda, is Ashley and Mary Kate Olsen of Full House fame's sister. Dude, I mean, those two were great in their heyday, but Elizabeth Olsen has this craft down. I mean,
Yeah.
chills up my spine. That shift, those beats, her understanding of how to really just shut a scene down and just walk us through everything she's feeling. Bro, it was so good. It was so good.
It was
I love
really
her.
good.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Geraldine also just an incredible partner in that scene. They just destroyed. It was the perfect acting scene. Like if you want an acting 101 scene, just put that on the board. Like come on, it was so good.
Oh yeah,
So,
Teyana Paris, who plays Geraldine, was awesome in this episode. Her whole monologue about the temp job and the advertising pitch, like I was just in awe of her. I was
Yes.
like, wow, what an amazing scene, what an amazing performance, like just killing it. And what's funny is you're not even focusing on her during that scene because the stork is walking around and Wanda's like trying to deal with that, but she's just in the background, absolutely just laying it down and killing it. It's so great.
yeah, she's got her commitment to that. So again, I only watched it one time through, but I always pay attention to the person who's not the focus. I'm still
Yeah,
paying attention to
absolutely.
the focus, but that's like I'm immediately trying to take in everything. and there was no half job on that. She was going to town. So we get Geraldine's expulsion. Wanda tosses her out of this mental prison. Whether Wanda created it or Agnes created it or someone else
Yeah.
created it. They were in it. So she tosses her out. She falls out of the sky into this
Yeah, she
dark
like
ground.
shoots out of this like bubble. It's almost like the mist from Stephen King. That's what I was kind of referring to. She just like flies out of there at a high speed and like barrel rolls across the ground and then is laying there.
Yeah.
And then she gets like surrounded by soldiers. Like there's a helicopter with a spotlight on her, and there's like all these guys with guns.
Six RVs, yeah, or not RVs, but tanks, like
Yeah,
whatever.
it's crazy.
These moments like this kind of remind me, because they're like picture perfect, picturesque kind of world. It reminds me of, I'm a big fan of the Truman Show. Sometimes I feel like I am
Yes.
Truman, living in a world and everyone's got cameras on me. You're an actor cam and you're just pretending with me. um, so that Geraldine was kind of like the girl from Fiji. She's trying to let Elizabeth Olsen / Truman know, like, hey, listen, there's more to this. There's more to this. Listen, listen, listen. You got to get out of here. And that's what it felt like. But then the pushback of trying to keep the reality that she wants, or the one that she's trying to build to protect her own subconscious. It's so cool to see that. So Geraldine is ejected and probably arrested. I kind of wonder how she got in, how Agnes didn't know, or maybe she was already in the world, but she was like a sleeper agent, knowing that she wanted to free Wanda in some way, shape, or form.
So I think she was sent in. Here's my theory. I think she was sent in, and the reason is that Monica Rambeau would not be someone who is familiar to Wanda. So if Wanda
Yes.
is perpetuating this lie, this alternate universe, sending in someone like Geraldine would be a perfect addition, because I almost think of this like Inception, right? Like Wanda is real, but everything else is subconscious, and they're acting in a way that makes sense. So like when Geraldine comes in, that's when things start getting haywire. And it's almost like in the dreams, whenever they like, Elliot Page is there and they're like, the dream guys are like turning on her because she's,
Yes.
or he's like in the dream. So that's almost what it feels like. Like that's what Catherine Hahn and like Herb, like what those guys were doing. They're like, something's not right here. They're like almost turning on this intruder, like a virus or something like that. So I think she was sent in, and I think when she's expelled, even though she gets surrounded by people with guns, I think that could be Shield. I think that could be Shield outside of the barrier, or Sword, which we'll get into a little bit too.
Yeah.
Surrounding her with guns because something's just been thrown out of the illusion, and they're like, whoa, 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 what do we got here? But I think those people might be friendlies, and they might be the ones who sent her into the void to try to get Wanda to snap out of it. And so I think the Ultron comment was intentional on Geraldine / Monica Rambeau's part. I don't think it was a slip of the tongue. I think it was intentional, but she was maybe like, oh crap, I've pushed this too far, too fast. She's not ready to talk about this. And Wanda quickly picked up on it, was like, you're gone.
You're gone. Yeah, it's so fascinating, right? Because deep down, Wanda knows that she's controlling things, like how she reset her conversation with Vision, and how she clearly expelled Geraldine. It's like she knows, but she doesn't want to accept it. So is this her own interdimensional therapy that she's going through? Was she there on her own volition, or was she placed there, but now her powers are too strong, even though she kind of wants to be there if she was imprisoned, but she needs to get out because she needs to work through this, otherwise she's never going to get better. And what a time, because mental health is so prevalent in 2021 here, so it's pretty awesome. I want to get into the mad speculation. That's my favorite thing to do. We're already gearing up that way. One last thing I want to say is that when Wanda is going through her pregnancy and sparks are flying, she's like shutting power down. Next door or down the street, Dottie's house goes out of power, and she walks out. This is just a funny moment. She walks out, her husband's sitting there reading a paper, I think eating a TV meal, and she goes, how do I look in this? And the power goes out, and he was like, Oh, thank goodness. You know, he gets
Yeah.
saved by it. That
Yep.
guy.
Do these earrings make me look fat? Is what she says, which is a hilarious statement because of course earrings could never. But yeah, it's just so great.
Yep. And that guy, I mean, he only had 1 minute to shine, and there are no small actors, and he nailed it. Like,
He did. He
I love
crushed it.
him. I hope we
He's
get
great.
more of him. I hope he's a big deal. So let's get into the crumbs. So we already talked about there's no beekeeper, there's no radio emergency call. I want to figure out what time we're in, Cam. Last week, I speculated that we were in the blip. That's out the window.
It
Once
is
we
out the
saw
window.
Geraldine's expulsion, like we're in the real world. We're in real timeline. So my theory, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. Now, with what I know, is that this is immediately after Tony Stark's funeral. That
Right.
Wanda couldn't keep it together. But the question is, did she put herself there, or was she put in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think it's the question in a lot of ways. So this is no fun, but Teyana Paris, who plays Monica Rambeau once again, did confirm this week that it is taking place shortly after Endgame. So you are correct about that, Kirk, as far as it seems. But yeah, I mean, is she? My question here is like the most traumatic thing that happened to Wanda outside of Pietro's death, which at that time that was different. Pietro died, but at the same time she got this new family. She got like Captain America and Viz and Natasha
The whole thing.
Romanoff and Falcon. Like she got those guys. And Natasha kind of like took her under her wing and was teaching her to be a spy and all that stuff. So she was able to deal with that trauma with her new support system. But now in Infinity War is where the real trauma happens because Vision dies, violently. Thanos crushes his skull. And then right after that, she gets snapped into oblivion, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, she's back in a fight against Thanos, and then it's Tony Stark's funeral, and we don't really get to check in with her. So I'm just like, I guess it's possible that the pure rage when she came back out of the blip was what fueled her for that fight, and that afterwards, when she was having to deal with her emotions and dealing with Tony being dead and dealing with Vision being dead and Black Widow, we can't underestimate that. That is an important character in her life. So she's got all this trauma she hasn't dealt with yet. It's possible that her powers went haywire, and so they brought in Agnes to put her in this thing, and maybe that's why Agnes is trying to like keep the peace. Or it's possible that Scarlet Witch was just like, no, like put me in a bubble. I need to be alone, So that is the question, man. And I think they continue to give us more questions than answers, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, we underestimate Scarlet Witch's power because it's kind of untamed.
Right.
She has these powers. Sometimes she goes ballistic with her emotions can just make much like any of the other superheroes. When their emotions are high, they're dialed up to 10 and they're kind of just out of this world. So you put trauma, like deep rooted trauma into that, and of course she's gonna go haywire. I think she
Yeah.
killed like 60,000 robot Ultron robots whenever Pietro died. Like right away, like bam, get out of here. Like I'm not dealing with this. So maybe
Yep.
her trauma had to be contained. Maybe she had to be locked down because maybe she was causing some crazy stuff in the world because of just her pure uncontrollable unhindered power because
For
it's
sure.
so big. So maybe they put the baby Yoda cuffs on her and said, listen.
Yeah, I mean,
Take a breath.
shout out to the Russos for doing a good job of painting that picture through Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. They do a good job of showing us like Wanda's power is massive but uncontrolled. She doesn't fully know. And even in this episode of WandaVision, when she's having contractions or she's having kicking, there are things happening that she's like, "Oh, did I do that?" There is a level of her power that is totally just off the chain and she cannot control it. And so yeah, that's the reason she's here. And where do they go from here?
Where do they go from here? Indeed. So I don't know whether if episode 4, whether we'll see Geraldine outside of this scope of world, trying like
Yeah.
negotiating with the powers that be, trying to get back in. Can some of the people inside of this reality leave and come back? Obviously, they can be expelled. How do they sneak back in? What's the doorway in? If Agnes is running the show or is a moderator of the show, can she hop out and come back in? Maybe go yell at Geraldine, come back in. What's the pathway? Those are the things that I'm kind of hoping what episode 4 will bring us next week.
Yeah, and I think a couple of other things to watch for. So during the scene where Wanda starts to notice that something's up with Geraldine, one thing she keys in on is her necklace, which is like an elliptical shape with a sword in it. And, it's easy to think that would be a reference to the government organization sword, which is the counterpart to SHIELD. And sword is the like space galactic side of things. So SHIELD is like they have Homeland in their name, like Strategic Homeland something and Logistics Division or something like that. And so they're like on the home front, but then SWORD is out in space. So the fact that Monica Rambeau shows up, we've not seen her before. She is wearing this sword necklace, so maybe she has affiliations with SWORD, especially if Wanda called it out. And then she's thrown out and surrounded by all these people. Like, is that SHIELD? Is it SWORD? Why is SWORD getting involved here? If this is, some other, if this is happening on Earth, that's a big question mark and one that I think will be interesting to look at. And I think it's an indicator, as you and I have theorized on our podcast and otherwise, that Marvel is going in a direction towards space, in the future. We've got the Eternals, we've got more Guardians, we've got more Thor, like all that stuff takes place off of Earth. So we could see SWORD come into play. We could see Monica Rambeau as an agent of SWORD.
Yeah, which makes sense because you're thinking, why Monica Rambeau? Why hook her in here? Well, if SWORD is the connection, Nick Fury's at the helm. He's up in space while Ben Mendelsohn is still mimicking him down on Earth. So in the MCU world, so it makes perfect sense why Monica Rambeau is pushed into this role of being this unknown. No one knows her face, so send her in as a sleeper agent and infiltrate and recover Wanda's mind and emotions and move her forward, so there definitely is some corruption, even if Wanda put herself there or if she was placed there on purpose. Obviously they need her out, because otherwise why was Geraldine coming in to remind her about her real reality? It's nuts. It
is nuts. And I think I like to speculate about what's to come. It was easy after the last 2 episodes to say like, hey, the twins are coming, hey, AIM might be coming because we got the Beekeeper. This episode has me, I don't know. I frankly don't know where we go from here. Like you said, I don't know if we're going to get more of the outside world and kind of be in this situation where we're shifting back and forth between, reality and Wanda's reality. I don't know if we're, with the Mirage, as I was calling it, taking such a severe blow by Geraldine coming in, by Herb and Agnes, like becoming more aware of what's going on, does it start to deteriorate even more rapidly, and what does that bring on? But again, more questions than answers at this point from my perspective.
Yeah, and as specific as the stork was during her pregnancy, obviously power surging, that's kind of expected when people's powers are, that's like a one-off, right? Like that the power is so powerful, it blows regular human electricity. You have a stork because obviously she's about to go into labor or is in labor. One other call out that is specific in her labor scene is that there's a picture on the wall spinning. So if Wanda's trying to live in this picture perfect world and it's spinning literally out of control, that's what caught my eye too. So there is no telling what's coming in this next episode. The speculation is a little bit more difficult. My hope is that we see one of the original cast members of like the main MCU hop in there out of nowhere, whether they're in Wanda's made up reality or they're in the real world and they're like recruiting with Geraldine. Maybe Nick Fury has a video call, a Zoom call with her. I don't know. Or he comes down to Earth and is in that room with her. Who knows? But that's my one prediction. Let's see if it happens.
Here's how that could happen potentially. I mean, we know that right now Elizabeth Olsen is in London trying to film Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That's what, they're on like super lockdown. So that's the immediate follow-up to this for her character storyline. In the comics, when Scarlet Witch spins out of control, specifically in Avengers Disassembled, this guy right here, Doctor Strange intervenes and visits her on the astral plane and is like, yo, you are making some stuff go wild out here. Like, we need to get this under control. Like, Avengers are dying. Stuff's getting weird. Like, come on. Come back to reality. So if I had to pick a surprise cameo, my money's on Benedict Cumberbatch coming in here to stop all this madness.
New York's hottest club is the Astro Plane.
The Astral Plane, baby. It has everything.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, we'll leave it at that because my mind is about to explode. One thing Cam called out before we started this episode is now every episode has a title. Shout out Cam for spotting that again. I'm going to watch every episode 6 times, so I'm on your level. We've got episode 1 is titled Film Before a Live Studio Audience. Episode 2, Don't Touch That Dial. And this most recent episode, episode 3 of WandaVision, titled Now in Color. Episode 4, who knows what's going to happen? Give us your thoughts. Drop it in on the comments below in the YouTube. I hope this is the right direction. I'm just going to point just in case
you got it.
You flip me upside down for some reason. I don't know. But drop it in the comments. Hit us up on Popcorn for Breakfast. We've got a website. We've got Facebook. We've got Twitter. We've got Instagram. We've got everything. We've got everything for you to connect with us, except our phone numbers. Maybe you'll get that soon. I don't know. But we want to give a huge shout out to our what do you call them? Our band. They're our band. We made them. We created them in the lab. They're called Rhetoric. They provide all of our music for this and our podcast. Thank you so much. We will see you guys next week.
Peace.